Hey everybody, today's topic's going to be a little bit advanced. I'm going to talk about simplifying Boolean expressions in the context of Python programming. And if you've ever taken a class in logic, you know what a Boolean expression is. It's basically just ORing together variables and ANDing them and possibly negating them with this little not symbol. And um, the nomenclature here is maybe a little weird if you're used to like seeing and or not spelled out, but these little vertical pipes are ors. The ampersand is and the tilde means not. And there are all these ways that you can simplify Boolean expressions. Some of them are relatively easy to understand, like the identity simplifications. All this is saying is that if your expression is that either x has to be true, or I'm sorry, that both x has to be true and true has to be true, well, that's the same as saying x because, of course, true is true. And then this one saying either x has to be true or 0 has to be true. Well, 0, which just means false, is never going to be true. So what you're really just saying is that x has to be true because you're not going to get anything from the other one. But then some of the other rules for simplifying Boolean expressions are pretty tricky. I mean, you'd have to really like kind of get your head around what this is saying here. One of the famous things that you learn in a logic class is de Morgan's rule, which is kind of fun. It's saying basically the negation of an and is like the or of two negations, and vice versa. But if you have the need in Python to simplify Boolean expressions, you don't want to write this yourself. Unfortunately, somebody has already written it, and that person's name is, I hope I pronounce this right, Sebastian Kramer. I guess that's not too bad for an English speaker to pronounce. But he wrote this library, and it's very well documented. He's got a user guide here, and one of the cool things about the library is that it's kind of Pythonic in nature. So if you want to like make algebraic expressions out of the Boolean variables x and y, you can kind of do it Pythonically. So here he's saying x and tilde x, which means x and not x, and of course that simplifies to 0 because you're basically, the expression is saying that either x is, or it's saying that x is both true and false, which obviously can't happen. Whereas the next expression says, well, either x has to be true or x has to be false, and that's always going to be the case because it can only be one or the other. And so that's all pretty cool. So I installed the library, and installing the library was as simple as running pip install boolean.py. You got to be a little careful. Don't do pip install boolean. That's another library. So make sure you have the .py on the end of it. But then I just wrote a really simple example program. So I import their library, which is called Boolean. I mean, the name of the project's boolean.py, but when you import it, it's just Boolean. And I use their Boolean algebra class to create a bunch of symbols. And all my Python variable names are just like the same name as the symbols. I build up an expression with their Pythonic syntax, then I simplify it, and then I assert that I get this much, well, definitely simpler form of the expression that I created. But what's unique about my use case is that I want to, once the Boolean .py library does all the hard work of simplifying the expression, I want to put it into my own terms. Like I want to essentially export the objects from the Boolean algebra expression into my own objects. And in this simple example, like my and object basically just stringifies whatever it gets. My or object stringifies it, and so on and so forth. So it's not the most interesting example, but I have a more sophisticated use case of mine that I'm not going to describe in this video. But in order to export it, I wasn't able to find a way in the library to do this. So what I have to do instead is write my own export function. And it's a little unfortunate because I have to kind of peek into the implementation of what they're doing. It's a very small function. This entire file has 17 lines, and that includes, like mentioning their copyright and importing the module. I've looked at their code. Like I don't think they're ever going to actually like change .args inside their code. But if they did, it would break it. So what I ended up doing is I published this example of what I'm trying to do. I published it to GitHub, and I kind of explained my use case here. And then I filed an issue against their project. I shouldn't use the word against. That sounds kind of aggressive. But I basically, described my use case, gave the code that I'm hoping that they add to their project, and provided a link to the GitHub example. And so we'll see what happens. I'll probably do a follow-up video if this issue piques their interest. It's always possible that I'm just overlooking some simple way to do this in a library already, but we'll find out. Thanks for listening.